My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Ellen Eggers. We're doing an interview with Ernest J. Buresh, who has been in the banking business in Cedar Rapids and the surrounding communities for many years. Ernie, tell us when and where you were born.
I was born October 28, 1926, and at Western, which is it's really not an incorporated town, but it's a mile north of Shueyville. And I'm not sure if I was born at home, but I think I was born at home. And the attending physician was Dr. Wesley Nedlitsky.
What were your parents' names?
My dad's was Joseph Buresh, and my mother was Emma. Her maiden name was Stanek.
Mm-hmm. Did your parents immigrate?
No, my grandmother did. My mother's mother immigrated from Pilsen in Czechoslovakia at age 6.
Do you remember any other than her? Do you remember your other grandparents?
Oh, of course. I remember my great-grandmother, Anna Bechichka, and my other great-grandmother also. Both of them, I remember both of them. They're Joseph Hauser. That was my mother's side of the family. And I never knew or remember if I had, I'm not sure I ever met my grandfather on my dad's side.
Mm-hmm. Any brothers and sisters?
I have one brother, or I had one brother, Lester, who died last year.
Mm-hmm. Was he younger or older than you?
He was older, age 82 when he died.
Mm-hmm. What was your dad's occupation?
Well, he was a farmer to start with, and then ended up being an international harvester implement dealer.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk a little about your childhood memories, Ernie. I want to pick your brain a little bit. Country school? Did you go to country school?
I went to country school. I started country school, believe it or not, at a little school that was called Buresh School, and it was just a block south of the first, which is now the first, was a Bohemian church, the first Presbyterian church near Ely, and that church is, or that school is no longer there. It was moved. It was made into a residence. I started there, and then that's when we lived on the farm in that area. And then from there, we moved to Shueyville. And I continued going to a grade school in Shueyville, and then finished out my grade school career, I guess if you call it, in the country school in Western, when my folks moved from Shueyville to Western.
Did you and your brother help your dad on the farm?
Yeah, as much as we could. You know,
how many acres was it, do you remember?
Oh, I remember the farm was 65 acres, and a lot of sandburrs, because I remember when we'd help them to pick corn, by hand. Man, the sandburrs are getting your gloves, and it was not a fun thing. I don't know how we made a living at that time.
Did he milk cows?
Well, we milked, a couple of 3 cows, I think, and I remember we fed hogs, and my job was to chop up pumpkins that where we grow in the field, and then we put them in a big
trough, like?
Well, we cooked them first in a cooker, and then after they were cooked, then we fed them to the hogs, and hogs go wild after that.
Were your folks religious people?
No. No. My mother came from a Catholic family, or her mother was Catholic. My grandfather was not. And that's an interesting story, because that's kind of where the Catholic connection stopped. My grandmother told me on more occasions than once that in their whole married life, they never had so much as a cross word between them, which is unusual.
Yes, it is. Especially as hard as times were back then. You remember Christmas as a young boy? Were they fun times, or could your folks afford to give you anything?
Well, we never got very much, and again, I want to emphasize that we were really poor, but I'm not sure it really impacted as much as it does now.
Because maybe a lot of people around were poor as you were.
Yeah, but there were a lot of them that were a little better off, and when somebody had new overalls, it hurt a little bit. And I'm not sure I ever had a new pair of overalls.
How about hunting and fishing?
I used to do a little bit of that. I used to trap a little bit when I was younger, but just to earn some money from the pelts.
Would your folks encourage you to hunt to put food on the table to rabbits?
No, my dad was kind of a hunter, but I really never cared for it too much. I kind of just did it because everybody else did it, I guess.
Was your folks able to make a living on the farm?
Well, we did, I guess. I never remember being hungry. We ate a lot of eggs and fried potatoes, I know that.
I imagine your mother had a large garden.
Always.
And put up a lot of produce, canned a lot of produce.
Yeah, she was, my mother was a remarkable person, absolutely remarkable. You're talking about the garden now, she always had a huge garden. And one of the things that she did was raise a lot of tomatoes. And I think, maybe I told you this story, but in the wintertime, she used these canned tomatoes, which she canned in a hurry. She just washed them and canned them. And then she fed them to her chickens and never had sick chickens. Amazing.
What I always find it interesting is ask people your age. I know they didn't call the doctor every time you cut your finger. Whenever you would have a serious cut, what would they use to try to heal it up?
As I remember, we used to buy a lot of Watkins products, and one of those products was a salve that they put on the udder of the
cows
so that they have cracked cracks. And I know she used a lot of that salve, and I can't remember what the name of it was anymore. But
did your mother ever make poultices?
Yes, out of sour milk, and
And they would put that over the wound and.
Yep. To pull out the infection if there was some, yeah.
You remember the Depression? Anything about the Depression? Did your dad lose the farm in the Depression, or?
No, he never owned a farm really. My mother inherited half of a farm, but my father never owned it. We bought an acreage in Western. That's when we moved from Schuylkill to Western. But
you would have been about 10 years old, about 12 years old during 1936 in the severe winter and the
I was 10 years
heat
old.
of the summer.
Yeah, I remember that. My mother.
1936 was it?
Yep. And I remember two things about that year. First, in the summer, it was so hot in our house because we have we didn't even have electricity, so we couldn't have a fan. My mother moved our bed outdoors, and then took a sheet and wet it, in a tub and put it over us to cool us off. And that it's a remarkable way to keep cool because as that evaporates, it really keeps you cool. Yeah. And the second thing is that in the winter then was a terrible snowstorm, and I went to my grandparents and I could walk right up the snowbank to the top of the barn.
Where would your folks go shopping?
16th Avenue.
Saturday?
On Saturday.
Was that a tradition, or you just...
Kind of a tradition. They want to visit with everybody, and...
Would in raising all those chickens, would she take eggs to...
To the Me Too?
And that would be her grocery money?
Yep. Yeah. That also turned out to be spending money for me all through college.
I imagine your folks were kind of homebodies. They probably didn't go too far in those days.
Well, there used to be a dance hall at Sioux Falls, and there was usually
Sioux Falls.
Yeah, you call it Sioux Falls. I call it Sioux Falls. But they belonged to a lot of card clubs. They played pinochle and did that, and occasionally we got to go along, and it was fun to do. But my dad was not one to take his children anywhere. My mother was the opposite. So when we got to go, it was really fun.
Did you ever get to go to a movie?
Not very often.
But did you smoke or chew when you was a kid?
Never.
Never did? Never had a inclination to try it?
Oh yeah, we tried it. I think the corn silk thing, but I never appealed to me.
How about your dad? Did he make home brew or?
Yep, he made home brew, a beer, and some wine, and on occasion drank too much, which turned me off because he'd be mean to my mother then, and that's hard to take when you're young and you're I don't know what
Yeah, when times are hard though, sometimes you get pretty down and a drink of home brew, it tastes pretty good. Was he a fun or serious? Probably a more of a serious type person, like as you was just speaking.
My dad?
Yeah, was he a fun type or?
Well, at home, I think he was, pretty tough on his family. But otherwise, away from home, everybody kind of liked my dad. I never was very close, to him for that matter.
Where'd you go to high school?
Well, the first 3 years, I went to Shueyville High School.
How many were in the class?
5.
And then after the third year, you...
Well, I knew I wanted to go to college, and I wanted to do engineering or architecture, actually architecture. But I didn't have enough math, to get in. So I went to Wilson High School in Cedar Rapids. And every subject that I took in my senior year in high school was math. Nothing else.
Was that a culture shock for you to go to the big city to your last year?
It was a struggle because my dad, didn't like it, didn't want me to, he thought I could stay at Shueyville. He didn't think I needed to go to college, get work at the packing house, he said. So it was not easy, but, it got along.
Did you have fairly decent clothes to wear, or did you wear bib overalls to high school?
No, I think my mother, helped me as, I didn't have the kind of clothes that everybody else had maybe, but they were okay.
Yeah. Did you drive a car? Or
No, I rode with the 2 brothers from Solon. Donald Dvorsky, I don't know if he still lives in town or whether he died. And I can't remember his brother's name, but I think it was Harry. They were from Solon.
When you were young, especially when you were around a senior, did you have any girlfriends? Did you date or go to dances? Or?
Oh yeah, I dated a couple different gals. One of them was in the home talent show that was in Swisher. That was kind of a success. We have pictures of that at home. It was kind of interesting. And then there was a gal a year behind me in school that never went anywhere.
Did you ever go to any dances?
All the time.
Where would you go?
Swisher, mainly, and the CSPS. In fact, our wedding dance was at the CSPS.
Mm-hmm. So, where did you get your first job?
My first job was when I was between my junior and senior year, I think, in high school. I worked at Collins Radio.
Really?
In the sheet metal department. Man, that was hard work. They made me lift all those 4x8 sheets, a 4-foot span for, that's greasy, but that was okay. I earned some money.
And then after that?
I
think you told me you were a messenger for...
Yeah, but that wasn't until I got out of service.
Okay.
After Collins, then I, of course, finished my senior year here and graduated on Thursday. And on Sunday night, I was on the train going to Fort Camp Dodge to go to the Army.
And where did you go from Camp Dodge?
From camp, I went to, let's see, where did I go from there? I think, I'm a little bit hazy on which came first. I was in the ASTP program in the service. But I took my basic training in the infantry in which was then Camp Hood, Texas.
You were telling me that you spent some time at Rutgers University.
Right, that was in the ASTP program. First I went, I think, this is the sequence. I think I went to South Dakota State Kings first. And then I think I went maybe to Rutgers. And then I think I went to Camp Hood, Texas, took the basic training, and then we got on a troop train to go to the Port of Embarkation, which is right across the river from Rutgers University. And we sat there, I think, for maybe 2 or 3 months, because that was the time of the Battle of the Bulge when all the 18-year-olds were getting killed, and I was 18. So then they sent us all the way back to Camp Hood, Texas. So that was a big share of my Army time was spent.
Sitting, waiting. What was this program, this ATP?
That's the Army Specialized Training Program. And it was an engineering program. It was civil engineering.
Civil engineering. And then what year were you discharged in?
1946.
What rank were you when you?
See, I went into the. I was discharged as a captain.
Did any of your high school buddies or school buddies go in with you, or did you go by yourself?
I went by myself.
Then was you able to take advantage of the GI Bill when you got out?
That's how I got my college education.
Okay. And
totally.
Where was that at?
Iowa State.
Mm-hmm. Then what year did you graduate from there?
1948.
Mm-hmm. Did you what did you get a good degree in engineering? Engineering. And what was your ambition, or what was your intention to do with your life?
Well, at that point, see, I started a business in Swisher. I had a feed business there. And while I ran that feed business, I went to the university, to the law school.
Didn't you also tell me that you taught farm training?
Yes, I did that. Let's see, it's kind of hard to remember the years. I think I did that right after I got out of college at Ames.
You were teaching, what, veterans, or?
Yes, veterans.
In what were you teaching them?
On-farm training.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, after I graduated from Iowa State, I took a job with clay equipment for a while, and that was traveling. I didn't like that particularly. And then I took a job with the U.S. Department of Agriculture to do a research project on the demand and diversity of electrical consumption on farms. And then I think I did, the
training of the veterans.
And ran the feed store at the same time.
This training the veterans, would that have been a government job? Or
yeah, that was a government.
And this was because so many young people were getting discharged from the service and nothing to do, and if they wanted to go farming, you were teaching them the ins and outs of the farming operation?
I'm not sure whether I was teaching them or they were teaching me. But it really was a good program, because we put together something and lots of dialogue between, the great bunch of fellas, most of them from Oxford, the Oxford area.
Were you married by this time?
I got married 1949.
Mm-hmm. And who'd you marry?
Joanne Paulson.
Was she a Cedar Rapids girl?
From Onslow, Iowa.
How'd you happen to meet her?
I think it was actually a blind date that was put together by a friend of my sister-in-law. My brother and sister-in-law lived in Mount Vernon, and this other gal lived in Mount Vernon also, but she was from Onslow. And she told Doris, "Oh, I know this gal that goes to Cornell," and so they set it up, and that's how it got.
What was her dad's occupation?
He was a banker.
And when did you get married?
Let's see, it was on Thanksgiving, 1949.
Why, any reason you picked Thanksgiving Day, or?
You only wanted to, I had a job, and so we got married on Thanksgiving, and then we had the day after, and then I went back to work Monday morning.
Did you have to get her father's permission to marry her?
I don't think I ever did. I don't know. I don't.
When you got married, were you gainfully employed at that time?
Oh yeah, I had it. I've always had a job.
Where was your first home together?
We lived in a motel in Ames while I think worked on that project. That was our first.
And then you were in the feed business in Swisher. Is this something you owned, or
Yeah,
you just
I just started it from scratch, and just rented the old depot building there.
Yeah. Did anybody give you any backing to get started, or?
No, well, no. My father-in-law, of course, if I needed to borrow something, I borrowed it through him.
Why'd you leave it? Did you have a greater ambition to?
Well, that's when I went to law school, and then I didn't think I wanted to do the feed business all night, because I used to have to get up like at 5 in the morning to unload, a carload of a railroad carload of fertilizer, and man, when I got to school, I was pooped.
Did you really intend to practice law?
Well, I wasn't sure, but I did. I tried it for a while, and I really disliked it.
Why?
Because everybody that came in seemed to have, the ability to sit down and work it out themselves without paying somebody to tell them what to do. And I just, didn't have that kind of desire.
So, I think you told me in about 1955 you bought a farm.
Right, bought the farm at Shueyville.
Were you figuring on farming it, or just
No,
an investment?
it was an investment. Cost $10,000. It's 120 acres. And my father-in-law thought I was really off the wall, because at that time, I had a $10,000 medical bill for Sandy. So he thought, what am I doing? But I also have to, he was a great guy. Joanne's dad was. Instead of having a big wedding, he said, "I'll give you $1,000 if you don't have a big wedding." And in 1949, that's a lot of money. So that helped us a lot.
And when were your children born?
Wendy was born in 1952, and Sandy was born in 1954.
And then I think in 1957 you told me you got a job at Merchants.
Yeah, after I got out of law school.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, though, I think you had said that you at one time were a messenger.
Here, in this bank.
In this bank? What was this bank called at this time?
It was First Trust and Savings Bank. That was right after I got out of service. I got up here and picked up the deposits from the merchants around town.
Would you have to use your car to drive around town?
They furnished a car.
And you'd go around and pick up all of their deposits at the end of the day and bring them to the bank? And
Yeah, right. Well, the way it worked is that these merchants would put their deposits together in the morning, and I would go. I think I did that while I went to Co. I went to Co for 1 year, and I'd verify the cash in the deposits right while they were there, to be sure it was the same. So that if it wasn't right, you were right there to verify it, and then just put it in a bag and go on to the next.
so when you did go to work officially for Merchants Bank, what position or what type of a job were you?
I was in the trust department.
And who was the president of the bank at that time?
Well, J.T. Hamilton started out to be the president. Then, of course, he died, and then, John. I'm not sure whether S.E. Cocolette was the president then. I think he was, and then John Hamilton, JT's son,
Yeah.
And then Jimmy Coquelet followed him.
Did anybody help you get this job at Merchants? Did anybody
No.
put in a good word for you, or you just go apply for it?
You know, my father-in-law might have been, you know, a help in that because he, you know, the connection.
And what hours were you expected to work?
I don't know, but I'm an early riser, always have been. And when I'd go to work at Merchants Bank, I was there before anybody else. And I think the only person I ever met on the street was Sud Dow's going to work at that time also.
Did you ever stop to think that you were probably being noticed for that quality?
I never thought too much about it.
Arriving on the job early and
You don't think about those things, I guess. But see, I'm still get up at 5 a.m., you know, at least. You know, I think this morning was before that.
who was your immediate supervisor at Merchants?
Russell Hess, great guy.
What kind of a salary did they pay you at that time?
When I started at Merchants National Bank, I made $500 a month, which was pretty good. 1957.
You had mentioned a trust. You was in the trust department. Did this have anything to do with the
Yep.
farming?
I looked after all the farms that were in the trust department, managed those.
Yeah. Was this something new to the banking industry?
Right. What it was at that time.
A department like this?
Yeah. Merchants did not have that department when I was there until I came.
And this would allow farmers to do what?
Well,
What type of service did it provide to the farming?
it didn't provide any service to the farmer. It provided a service to, I guess, to the farmers by including it in their estate plan. In other words, they put it in a trust for the benefit of someone like Coe College. I remember we had some farms at Coe, and we managed the farms for the beneficiaries of the trust.
And how long were you in that position?
7 years.
In that 7 years, did you meet any of the movers and shakers in downtown Cedar Rapids?
Well, I think, the same people that I had to deal with, a lot of the lawyers, of course, which was, interesting. I used to know almost every lawyer in town. Now,
How about Sud Cook,
I knew Sud Cook.
George Forstner?
Well, George, of course I knew George. You know the story about George.
Joe Sinanko?
Joe was on my board at City National Bank.
Joe was Jewish, wasn't he?
Yes.
Did anybody, or did you ever see any discrimination against the Jewish race in that day and age?
Well, I know there was some down in Florida. We used to go in the winter. Used to go down and spend time with Margaret and Howard Hall, and the routine was always to fly to Miami Beach and stay at their apartment in the Seaview Hotel. And during one of those visits, Howard called up and said, Joe is up at Fort Lauderdale. And he said, Joe's up there, you call him up and tell him to come down to the Seaview Hotel and come up and see our apartment, or the apartment that we were staying in. So I did call Joe, and Joe said, well, let's have dinner. He didn't say anything about coming up to see the apartment. But when he got there, he called up and he wanted us to come down. And I said, well, don't you want to come up? No, he didn't want to come up. And then I found out later that Jewish people just did not go into the Seaview Hotel. Amazing.
Did you ever notice any of that around Cedar Rapids?
No. In fact, Lou Feldman, was a really close friend of Howard. And I think that, that was, I think he liked Lou, and he liked, a lot of, he liked all kinds of, he even liked Czech people.
Did you, in those 7 years, did you get to know quite a few of the older gentlemen around the city that could make things happen?
Yeah, of course. My close association was with Sud Dow's and S.E. Coquelet and Howard. and of course with John Hamilton. I once got into a business deal with John in Forbes Oldberg. We bought a farm in Jones County.
Mm-hmm. What kind of people was Sud in? Sud Cook was in. Nice individual to work with.
Well, Sud Cook, I didn't have a whole lot. I just knew of him because he was at the Roosevelt Hotel. But Sud Dow is a great guy.
How about S.E.? What was his real name, S.E.?
St. Elmo, yeah.
Did anybody ever call him by that name?
Oh, I think occasionally. I think Howard would refer to him.
Just jesting? Yeah. Try to embarrass him a little bit?
Well, I don't know. Those guys, they were a fun group.
What type of person was S.E. Coquelet?
Wonderful. I have nothing but good. He was a manager that paid attention to detail. I'd see him a lot of times going through the bank, picking up paper clips, kind of thing, asking people, to keep their desks clean. A management style that I still adhere to as much as I can.
Yeah. I had read where this group of businessmen in downtown would meet. They called themselves the horse traders. Had you ever heard of that at that time? Had you ever heard of that expression?
Oh yeah, many times. I never participated in that, but that was everybody kind of seemed to know at that time.
So after the 7 years you spent at Merchants, then what took place next in your life?
Well, that's when I started to buy banks while I was at Merchants National Bank. I bought the bank at Martel and financed it with the help of my brother through Merchants National Bank. SE did that for us. And I didn't go there right away. I stayed on until, I never went to Martel to run the bank. I then got interested in the bank at Anamosa, and so I was going to move the charter from Martel to Anamosa, but my father-in-law was friendly with the people that owned the Anamosa Bank. And they said, well, don't be moving in here. We'll just sell you our bank. So that's when I bought the Anamosa Bank in 1963, and that's when I left Merchants to go to run the bank.
Hadn't you been involved in City National, though, first?
Yeah, well, let's see. I can't remember when I bought it.
1957, I think you told me that.
I think that might, that was when Howard was chairman of City National Bank, and it wasn't doing very well and having a lot of problems. And so he asked John Hamilton if there was somebody he thought, would be helpful by coming on the board, and John suggested I might do it. So I did. I was on the board for a short time, and then finally Howard said, you better go in and run it. So I did. I was president of City National Bank at the same time I went to Anamosa.
Bought the one in Anamosa, yeah. You had mentioned obtaining a charter. Explain what is this?
A bank charter?
Yes.
Well, a bank charter is basically a license to do business as a banking entity.
In a particular place at a particular time? Or?
Right. At a particular place, and it goes. It's a bank is a corporation, so if you get a license, it's issued by the state of Iowa through the banking department.
To the corporation, not to an individual.
Right. Mm-hmm. Then you buy stock, in the corporation, and that's how the ownership is determined.
Then I think you told me in 1971. Then you purchased the controlling interest in City National.
That's probably about right.
Mm-hmm. Did you live in Anamosa?
Yes, for 29 years.
After buying the bank?
After I bought the bank.
Yeah. Did you enjoy living in the small community?
Yeah, actually, while we were there, it was really, we enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. And it's a nice town.
When did your relationship with the Halls start growing? And was it more strictly business, or was it growing into a friendship type of?
Well, I think it started into the friendship mode the minute Howard found out that Joanne was from Onslow. And from there on, it was pretty close relationship.
Yeah. There was quite an age difference, I think. I figured out was that you were 32 years difference in age.
That could be, but I never, that never occurred to me.
Did you ever detect any jealousy amongst your peers as to being that close to Mr. Hall and
Not about
they couldn't get in to see him?
not among the peers, but certainly, I guess this is just the truth, but George Forstner was extremely jealous. Howard never had him on any of his boards. And every time I meet George, he asks me, are you on the Hall Foundation board? Are you on the Iowa Manufacturing Board? And he knew that I, was. But every time he met me, he'd ask me those questions. And I think, then, he did some other things that, probably followed me through the years with other people to, kind of get back at me. I didn't have anything to do with it, though. That was Howard's decision.
Do you ever think back that maybe Howard was possibly treating you like a son he never had? Or?
Yeah, I think it was even more than, I brought all of his investments, and I guess I don't know how to characterize it, totally. We did so many things together, and we, made so many trips to Florida, and spent it in there. We down at Marathon.
Yeah. What cemented your relationship? I think he was telling me you felt it was the first time he called you.
Yeah, that incident was he called one night and said we'd never been to Florida, and he called one night and said, "You better come down to Florida." And I said, "When?" And he says, "Tomorrow." And I said, "Well, we got 2 kids, and I don't know if they can get there." That so, well, bring them along. And that's just exactly what he said. So I said, "Well, we'll try to get it organized." And he said, "By the way," he said, "when you get your airline tickets, fly Delta." He said, "That's the best airline to come down here on." So you get and the next day we were on our way to Florida, and that's how it started.
Did you ever find him giving you bits of advice or words of wisdom that?
Yeah, always. Yeah, I have a lot of things that, the one that I remember the most and I repeat the most is, don't get your name in the paper. And I really understand that. And let me share with you the reason that I understand that so well is that, people don't want to read about you. They want to read about themselves. They don't want to see your picture in the paper. They want to see their own picture in the paper. So if you want to incite jealousy and revenge, get your name in the paper.
Did he ever encourage you to? You served on a lot of boards in your lifetime. Did he ever encourage you to do this, to try to serve on as many boards as you could?
I don't think he ever encouraged me. He discouraged me. He discouraged me from going on the Board of Regents. He said that's a no-win situation. He once wanted me to get on the banking board, the Iowa State Banking Board, but I never did that. Never had the opportunity. Never was given the chance to do that.
Yeah. Would you consider him as your mentor?
Absolutely.
And I think you told me in 1983, Ernie, you sold your interest in your holdings in the City National Bank then.
Yeah, to Pete Bezanson.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever have any regrets for
I'm not
unloading that?
I'm not a seller, so that was tough for me to do. Yeah. But Guy Sleep ran that bank, and I guess he wanted to retire, and he had I let him acquire a substantial share, and that was a way he could benefit from that. So I went along with that, and the same way with the Anamosa Bank. My brother had a substantial share in that bank also, and he wanted to retire. So I did that, you know, in
What year did you sell the Anabosa Bank?
1992, I think.
And why? Because your brother wanted out of it?
Yeah.
Was he getting to the age of retirement, or was he just?
Yeah, well, he was, well, let's see, he's 5 years, he was 5 years older than I am, so, let's see, in 92, how old was I? I was about 64 or 5, and he was 70, so, you know, that's about...
Mm-hmm. Did you, a lot of your banks have been in small towns. Did you get a feeling that you pretty much knew everybody in town and everybody knew you and respected you? And it
Well, I don't know if they
nice
respected
feeling?
me, but I probably knew almost everybody in Anamosa.
But it was different than having a bank in a large city, that
Yeah,
you were closer to the people, that
yeah, right.
you spent more time probably with some of your clients than they would in a large city.
Yeah, it's a different kind of banking. You know,
Yeah. What's the effect does interest rates have on the high interest in the 70s? What effect did that have on your banking?
well, of course, in some instances, you know, it caused people, you know, a lot of problems because they couldn't, you know, make the payments. Mm-hmm. And a lot of contracts were rewritten so that they could make the payment, that kind of thing. A lot of farmers got in trouble. We never had any problem during that period with loans because, you know, we operate really conservatively, and our philosophy is different. We're here with an office in Martel.
Any longtime employees that's been with you for years?
Oh, yeah.
Quite a few.
Well, particularly at Anamosa, you know, I can't ever remember. It's a different story now than it was back then. But I think more than half of those employees, or maybe 3/4 of them, were there the whole time I was.
Do you have quite a turnover nowadays?
Not more than we'd like. You know, I hate turnover. But that's the kind of what happens today.
How about the quality of the people? Are they as industrious as?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I mean, people. One of the problems, the bigger problem I think I have is that they tend to want you to tell them everything they need to do. It's hard to find self-starters.
They're afraid to take anything on, or.
And it might be my management style too. You know, I've had people tell me they're afraid of me, and you know that I have a hard time understanding.
Do you recall any changes in your lifetime that had the greatest impact on banking? And thinking back,
On banking,
yeah.
I don't think there's been any huge changes. Oh yeah, I guess probably the biggest change is automation. You know, in computers. That's the biggest change, which is, in my opinion, the greatest thing that ever happened.
This village bank we're at now on 3rd Street. Did you ever come here with your dad as a young boy?
No, I never had the opportunity to go to the bank with my dad. I guess he never thought it was important for me to know what a bank looked like.
What was this bank called back then?
First Trust and Savings Bank.
Was it pretty much check clientele that would?
Yeah, absolutely, it was almost totally check.
And you're in the process of restoring it or putting it back to its original condition?
Yeah, I think we're 90% done with the restoration. We just acquired that scale out there, which everybody remembers, and this is unreal, but that's the original scale that was here. And a fella one day over in the Cherry Building told one of our fellas that, you know, I got a scale that I think came out of the bank. He said, I got it when they got rid of it. And so he wanted to give it to us, but I paid him for it, and we totally restored it. We stripped it all and repainted it down to the original paint, and it looks pretty good.
Is this building on the National Historic?
No, but that's something we've thought about a lot of doing.
I think you mentioned the fact that you reside at the Weaver Whitwer estate. Who was Weaver Whitwer?
Well, Weaver Whitwer was a merchant here who ran a wholesale food business, and he had 32 farms, if you can believe that. And I never met him, but there's stories about him standing up at having his desks up on orange crates and talking on 2 phones at a time, and not signing his checks when he paid for his produce so that he could get the float. They'd send the check back to be signed, and those are the stories I hear. And I also hear that when he had company and he was ready to go to bed, he just went to bed.
How did you happen to be in a position that you could acquire his estate then?
Well, I was chairman of the St. Luke's Health Foundation, and they were a beneficiary of the Whitwer Trust. And People's Bank was a trustee, and as I examined, our involvement in that, it didn't seem like we were getting very much out of that trust for the amount of assets that were in there. And to make a long story short, we finally prevailed on them to sell off that, because they were spending $40,000 a year to maintain it. Molly Busterud had a life estate, and so they had to maintain it. And she really didn't want to. She had to stay there so much of the year in order to maintain. And her lawyer was Buck Riley, who was in my class in law school. And then I visited with him, and to make a long story short, we bought out Molly Busterud's interest for $350,000. St. Luke's paid. The bank wouldn't pay that, so out of the funds. So we paid it out of our funds at St. Luke's, and I prevailed on Sister Mary Lawrence to participate equally, which was a great gal to do that. And then when it came up for sale, they did it at an auction, and the minimum bid was $500,000, and they required $10,000 increments. And we sat there for a little bit, and nobody said anything. And finally, I said, "Well, I'll bid $510,000." And another fellow said, "I'll bid $520," and I said, "I'll bid $530," and it was over. That was the end of it. So that was 40 acres. And then they sold the other part for the same amount, $530,000. So it went from a $40,000 deficit to $1 million plus asset.
And you become the owner of a how many room?
Well, I don't know how many rooms it has.
You haven't counted them all yet.
No, the only thing I never in my life made a house payment, and I never wore a wristwatch, and I never read the funnies.
Any
weirdo.
Any words of wisdom for young people today in regards to borrowing money or buying on credit?
Absolutely. It's not how much you make, it's how much you save. And the biggest problem, I think, in our economy, or whatever you want to call it, is that people have a hard time managing their personal finances. The material things in life ruin them. They want things they can't afford. It's just one of those things that, I was really fortunate because my mother was a great saver. And, that to me, that's kind of the answer.
I was going to ask you if you learned any lessons from your folks that you remembered, and one of them was your mother saving.
Not from my dad, but I learned everything I owe everything. If I had any success at all, I attribute it all to my mother.
With all of your banks you're trying to keep tab on, what do you do for relaxation?
I like to play bridge. I play bridge over the noon hour twice a week, and I like to work. You know, I like to go out. I garden. You know, I do a little bit of. You know, I do some tomatoes and stuff like that, and then flowers. I do all that.
Country club? Golf?
No golf. That takes too much time. I'm no good at it, and I don't have the patience.
Did your wife ever tell you you were an alcoholic, I'm sorry, a workaholic?
She never accused me of being an alcoholic, and I don't know that she ever used the word workaholic either. Yeah. But for sure, I know she never called me an alcoholic.
Let's talk about your daughters. Is this an anniversary picture, Ernie?
Yes, that's a 50th wedding anniversary picture.
This is your wife, Joanne?
Yes.
Lovely lady. Even though she is married to an alcoholic. Yeah. And we're looking at who here, Ernie?
That's Wendy, my daughter Wendy.
Mm-hmm. And where is she today? Then?
Well, she's a family practice physician here in town.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm.
And practices medicine.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
Okay, these are Wendy's two children and our grandchildren. The girl is Katie, who is 21 years old, and TJ is, I think he's 18.
Did either say what they would like to do in life?
Well, I'm not sure they know. Katie is just graduating now in June from University of Wisconsin in biology and something else, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and thinks maybe she wants to be a doctor, but you know, I don't know about that. And then TJ, who's had a lot of problems with attention deficit kind of thing, is in his, I think, maybe second or third year at Loras College. He's doing a lot better, but he had some early things to deal with. He went to Temper Management School up in Michigan, and so he, but I think he's doing better.
Very good. And this is
Sandra, and Sandy, of course, lives with us, and the reason that she does live with us, she's 50 years old, of course, and has had, many major operations. The most serious, of course, was when she was, I think, 5. She had her first heart operation. She had a septal defect in her heart, which means that there was a hole between the two ventricles. So they went in and put a plastic patch in there, but didn't close it totally because the pressures were too great and it would have killed her if they had. So I think then when she was age 10, they had to go back in to put a patch on the patch. And that was a worse operation than the first one, and had a hard time stopping the bleeding. It was really traumatic. These operations were done at Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago. And one of the traumatic things about that was that after her operation, she was in a bed next to a boy that was hit by a car and died in the next bed. And so, and I remember being at the hospital and sitting there all night long, just hoping that she'd do okay. The reason they had a problem with the bleeding was that her heart was the scar tissue. It grew to the chest wall, so they had to cut the heart away from the chest wall, and that that's the bleeding that they couldn't get stopped. So she had that was very traumatic for us. And then she also has had several, I think she had polio at one time, and they had to do, several, it paralyzed the pharyngeal flap in her throat, so it affected her speech. and they did an operation. Dr. Hoffman at Iowa City did an operation. They put a kind of a string through her. They fastened her palate up, and then put a string through it with a lead ball at the end, or some steel, ball, and that was put to keep the opening open in the flap. Well, then when she went, that was before she had her second heart operation, and then of course after she had her second heart operation, she threw up, and this ball came out of her mouth, and the nurses just went ballistic. So they didn't know what it was. So those are the kind of things we had to live with. Then when she's had a corneal transplant in her eye, and Dr. Moyer insisted on doing the anesthetic because they had to put her under. She couldn't do it under a local anesthetic, and he said that was the worst case he ever did in his life, because she stopped breathing on him, and they had a terrible time bringing her back. So those are the kind of things we've had to deal with. But she's the best thing that ever happened to us. She is really a joy to have. She has a great sense of humor. It'd really be. I think the good Lord took care of us when He gave us Sandy.
Ernie, unless you have any other memories to share with us, the Carl and Mary Kaler History Center of the Linn County Historical Society would like to thank you very much for sharing your memories with us.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for giving us that chance to do this.
Thank you.